Right, and now it is 6 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get this started. Welcome, everybody, to this evening's meeting of the Community Consolidated School District 46 Board of Education meeting. It is Wednesday, February 21st, beginning at 6 p.m. here at Frederick School. I need a call to order via roll call, please.
Mack.
Here.
Braden.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Albert.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Weedman.
Okay, that's quorum. Please join me for the pledge. Okay, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda, please.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
LaCroix.
Aye.
And Nash.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And we do have public comment this evening?
We have two public comments.
Okay.
First one is Kate Matthey.
Wonderful. You can head over to the... Together? Sure, that's fine. On that microphone over there, there's a button. Just click that and it'll turn it on for you.
There we go. All right. My name is Kate Matthey. I'm a parent of students that went to Frederick School. They've been Meadowview School, GMS. My daughter is at Grays Lake North High School right now. My son is at Park School right now. So we've been all around the district, and I've been involved helping out in different capacity. But I just wanted to thank you for putting on the agenda the gun safety resolution. I think it's very important for us to kind of make sure that our community understands that this is an important issue, and the district supports that and kind of pioneers the effort to speak to the community and normalize this conversation about gun safety and secure storage. I really like that you have the Be Smart program on the safety, under the safety on the website, available. Sue and I have spent this summer going to farmers market and providing information to the community about this program and the resources that are available, and giving out gun locks to the community. And we've given away over 100 over the summer and the fall and this winter. So just once again, thank you.
And if I could just add, as a retiree from the district into my second year now, I am so proud to be standing before all of you, and so proud of my former district. I'm like choking up. I know that sometimes schools are a little hesitant to get involved in issues like this, and I am just thank you each from the bottom of my heart that you are willing to be leaders on this and to take action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here this evening. Okay, that moves us on to board reports. I'm going to go ahead and start really quickly because mine's really short. Just a couple of reminders. If you have not let Sue know yet about your attendance at the Lake Division meeting that's coming up on March 13th, I believe she has to register us by March 4th. Just let her know. And then also a reminder that the superintendent's evaluation is in your emails. Our board policy requires that we complete that by February 28th. So if you have not done so already, please begin work on that so we can move that along for Dr. Glickman. And that's my update. I'll start over here tonight.
Okay, I just have a short one. And Jess, I'm doing this from memory, so maybe you can check me on this. The food drive is March 16th. So if you have food that you want to share with the Avon Township Food Pantry, you can drop it off at any of the schools. And each school will have specific drop-off times, so you can check with your schools. But we are collecting food for the spring, again, March 16th. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Braden?
Excellent. I have one update on the governor's budget address from today. So per the governor's budget address, which is not the budget, he is advocating for EBF to continue to be funded at $350 million. So I think Chris Wildman expressed it well in a community meeting recently, which is while we're extremely grateful to the state for continuing to fund per the EBF formula, there's still a gap that exists. But just wanted everyone to know that it looks to stay intact in the budget. In a time when there's revenue concerns over the next couple of years, I think that's in a lot of ways a win. So just wanted to keep everybody updated, and I'll let you know how the actual budget discussions go in the General Assembly as we move forward.
Ms. Nash?
Thank you, Dr. Mack. I do not have a board report this evening.
All right, thank you. Mr. LaCroix? Mrs. Albert?
I have a quick one as well. Just want to share that I participated in the IASB book study. Think Again by Adam Grant. Excellent book. I encourage you all to read it if you haven't yet. And so many good takeaways. You may find in your email inbox in the next few days. I will probably forward the study guides to you, because if you don't have time to read the book, you should at least look at the study guide that the IASB put together. So that's it.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, moving right along, back to the superintendent's report, Dr. Glickman.
That was quick. All right, well, we're going to start by talking about progress at GMS and the repairs there. So I'm going to hand this over to, I think, Roberto is going to talk. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. So over at GMS, this week they completed the asbestos abatement for the gym floor. Now that the abatement is completed, we're going to stay on schedule for the replacement of the wood floor in the big gym there. We also had 2 backflow preventers that were installed and are ready. We're continuing replacing pipes that were damaged throughout the building. New flooring will be installed in classrooms as we receive materials for the unit ventilators. So as we're getting those coils for the unit ventilators, we're working with 2 teams to make sure that the communication is there for that to, as they're releasing the rooms, then the flooring company is coming in and installing floor. All the damaged sprinkler heads have been replaced. So originally we were at a large number at 365, but they ended up replacing a little over 500. At this point, we don't have any updates on the timeline aside from what was communicated before for the end of April.
Thank you, Roberto. Sticking with our GMS theme, I do have some information to share about how things are going over at GMS East. So first of all, this week our leadership team took a little field trip over to GMS East. We have leadership team meetings every other week, and this week we started over at what we are now calling East. Sometimes we just call it East. We started there because we realized that some of our principals hadn't had opportunities to see what was going on over there. So it was kind of a nice opportunity for people to get out of their buildings and see what the folks over at GMS are doing with our students at GMS East. That was really very nice. I was looking at my notes from 2 weeks ago. That was when we had just gotten the news that we would be there until April 26th. And so at that time, I shared that we had a couple of time hurdles that we needed to get over in terms of times that the building was already, the University Center was already reserved. So I just want to go over those kinds of things because there's been great progress there. First of all, Election Day is a day that University Center is already promised. It's a polling place. However, we've worked with the University Center to contain polling to an area of the building that students and teachers will not be using at all. Voters will be able to come in a side door. They'll do their voting in this area. We have a security guard that we've been working with throughout our entire time that we've been at GMS East. He'll be there posted at the door, kind of in between where the students and staff are and that wing, so there'll be absolutely no connection at all between the community voters and our students and staff. So that's worked out very nicely. We don't have to do anything to clear out of the building that day. And then in April, there was a lengthy project that's actually been whittled down to one day. So, board, you may have heard of the wonderful non-for-profit called Mother's Trust. Mother's Trust does many projects for families and students in need. And in the spring, they do a prom event where students who need to be able to get prom wear can shop in a large area for brand new prom clothes and other accessories. So in the past, they've used University Center, and they've actually used it for a full week because they've had just a few people available for setup and tear down. But really, they only need it for a weekend and one day for an event on April 12th. So all of the lead-up time was for setup, and all the end time was for takedown. So we've the people over at Mother's Trust absolutely understand that we do need the space. So we've made an agreement that we will provide some volunteers to be found yet. So board members, I can't promise we won't come knocking on your doors, because we are going to need some volunteers to actually help Mother's Trust set up the prom clothing and set up for the event and then take it down again. But this allowed us to whittle the whole thing down to one day. I was in touch with Mr. Smith about that today, and they're working on a field trip. And so as soon as we know what that is, we'll let you know. Our PE teachers, starting next week, will be hosting team walks during the school day, weather permitting. So we're glad to get that started, and that's in addition to any of the days that, or any of the walks that our teachers are already taking their students on during the school day. And we've had some recent media attention. You may have seen an article that I think I first saw come online maybe last Friday, but ended up in the Sunday paper, the Sunday Tribune, so that even my family members who aren't online were reading it in the paper version of the Sunday Trib. It was a pretty nice article. That was one that I was actually interviewed for. I do want to make one correction. You know, when you're speaking to reporters, they don't, I'm about to offend people, and I don't mean to do that at all. Everyone tries to get it right. There's always nuances that are important, right? So there was one nuance that wasn't correct in that article. I think it says something about the day after we found out that we were going to need some time away from GMS, we opened up in our new location the very next day, which would be very impressive of us, but is not true. We're very proud that we did it in five days, but please, board, know I did not tell anyone that we did it in one. And then I think you know that I think it was Monday, I was interviewed by Dave Wall for the Discovering Grays Lake podcast, and that went live on Friday. Mr. Wall really works very hard with members throughout the community to let people know what's going on in the community in Grays Lake. I'll admit it's a pretty lengthy podcast because I talk first about what happened at GMS, then I go into the creation of GMS East with quite a lot of pride, and then I speak for about 45 minutes about the referendum. So it's a long podcast, but it's out there. So moving forward, Amy, will you talk with us about Institute Day?
Sure. Good evening. So we had an Institute Day last Friday on February 16th. We participated in the Lake County February Institute Day. They did a little play on that word for some cold and burr for winter. It was put together by the Lake County Regional Office of Education with committees from members from different districts that would be participating to help to plan for that. I was able to participate in planning for the day, and it was a great day. We had grades pre-K through 5 from the whole county attended the Institute Day at our own park campus, so we're pretty proud of that. And grades 6 through 12 from the county attended sessions at Lakes High School in Antioch. Presenters included staff from participating districts as well as others that were willing to share their expertise with all of the teachers. We had keynote speakers at each of the sites. So the keynote at Park Campus was Dr. Brad Johnson, and the keynote at Lakes High School was Devin Hughes, who we actually had work with us as a leadership staff last summer. So great to have staff be able to hear him as well. And then we had from our district, we actually had some of our own staff members present as part of the Institute Day. So I want to make sure that I mention them. At Park Campus, we had Annalise Polanzani. She presented about multilingual learners, newcomers, and refugees. We also had Stephanie Tim and Marnie Immerman present about social emotional learning in the classroom and supporting that. And then at Lakes High School, we had Jennifer Everett and Yvonne Schmid present about reading strategies for engaging most reluctant readers at the middle school level. So overall, I would say it was a pretty exciting day, and staff, we've been hearing positive feedback from staff. I do want to pause and thank our O&M department and our technology departments, because without them working with us to help to set up Park Campus, the day would not have been able to run as smoothly as it did. So just wanted to make sure I paused to thank them.
And Amy, because I know you can't thank yourself, I will do that on your behalf. Really, Mrs. Gluck spent an unbelievable amount of time getting things organized. It was a truly wonderful day. I had the opportunity to be over at Lakes, which means I didn't have to worry about what was happening at Park Campus and didn't have to be responsible for it because Amy was responsible for it. And I got to just be over at Lakes learning, and it was a great day. I got to sit next to your superintendent at a workshop, and it was terrific. So we're looking forward to it again next year, yeah. Okay, and we're going to hand it over to Stephanie, who I think has 2 topics for us. Yeah.
I am happy to announce that Access, which is the English proficiency exam for ML students, is complete, and we will be able to receive the results the first week of May. Also, I wanted to thank Tech Campus because they received all of GMSE students for 2 days, so we were able to access test uninterrupted. It was very, very nice. And then the second thing, to change topics, MPAC is hosting Cultural Dance Night, March 1st at Prairie View from 6 to 8, and we will have 2 presentations. One is a flamenco dance, which many of us will be participating in, as well as a folkloric ballet with Mexican traditional dancing. So at Prairie View. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris Wildman, talking about the RCC.
Thank you. The committee met on February 14th. Last meeting before that was October of 2023. We discussed the performance of our solar, recent property disposal by the technology department. We then reviewed printing data and paper orders by the building using our print management system, PaperCut. We had some really nice reports that we could look at for the second time. And then we had a presentation from a vendor who is going to be bringing compostable trays to the elementary buildings. And finally, we talked about next steps in our collaboration with Brightbeat as we discuss next steps in the composting.
Thank you. And that's it for the superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, Mr. LaCroix?
Yeah, a little tardy on this, but I was hoping to ask a follow-up question on Roberto's report. You had mentioned, and it just kind of caught my eye, that you said that the floors would be worked on as materials become available. And that made me think about, in the headlines over the last several years, there's talk about supply chain limitations. Is there any limitation due to supply chain problems, or is this just, kind of just-in-time materials arriving when the room is ready? Any impact from supply chains on this?
Yeah, so we're being impacted with the coils for the unit ventilators. One of the big reasons is because some of the unit ventilators are older unit ventilators. So some of the parts they're not currently in production. And so some parts have to be custom made. and others are going to be, retrofitted to fit what we currently have. And so, yeah, we are impacted by that when it comes to the HVAC systems.
So it doesn't sound like supply chain writ large problems, but very specific to the things that need to be replaced.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for this evening, including the personnel addendum that was sent earlier to us today.
I move.
Braden.
Aye.
Nash.
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
And Mack.
Aye. Okay, we've got a few action items to vote on this evening. Our first one is I need a motion to approve the network switch maintenance and support contract as it had been presented to us.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Okay.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Nash.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
And Albert.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, I need a motion to approve the resolution denying the acceptance of teacher resignation Lorelei Rodriguez pursuant to the school code 1055/24-14.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
And Nash.
Aye.
Okay, next we have a motion to approve the press policy updates, 113, and these were the ones that had gone through the policy committee at the last meeting, and then a couple of the ones that we went through this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
And Nash.
Aye.
Did I need to do a motion for that one on the bottom here, the 5-year review? It's got a separate bullet point? No, that was,
No,
it's
they're
just,
all
okay,
included.
okay, all right. Okay, so that concludes the action item section. We are now on to unfinished business with the referendum update.
Yep, I have a brief update for you. This week, we had a community meeting over at Woodview. There were some really engaged community members at that meeting, and we had some great conversation. We have 2 more meetings scheduled for any community members who'd like to come and learn about the referendum and, most importantly, get questions asked and answered. So we have one next Monday. This has just been added at University Center, also affectionately known as GMS East, and that will happen at 6:30. Might be a good time for people to get a peek at the building if they'd like to do that. So that'll be next Monday on February 26th. Then we have one at Wednesday, February 28th, over at Meadowview School. Also this afternoon, Mr. Wildman and I, with support of our tech team, recorded the same presentation, but without the question and answer opportunities, right? So we recorded that, and that will be on our website probably early next week, I'm guessing, yeah. So that'll be for anybody who didn't get a chance to come out to the meetings. But again, doesn't give you opportunity to ask questions when you're watching it from home in that way. But we want people to be as informed as possible. We're always available for question asking. So people can email or call me directly or Chris, and we are always happy to answer questions. Families, all community members should have received a mailer recently with information about the needs of the district and the reason for the referendum. That mailer included a section called Just the Facts, and it really goes, it's understanding each part of the ballot question. And one of the things that we talk with our community members about when they come to one of the meetings is that the ballot question is really complicated when you read it. Those are written by attorneys. They're written in a really specific way. They're just not user-friendly. There's no way around that. And so the mailer that was sent to people's homes goes through each section of the ballot question and explains the ballot question. I do want to point out that something that I think everyone needs to know is that when you look at the ballot question, when you're in the ballot box or you're sitting at home filling out your at-home ballot, there's nowhere on that ballot that explains that money is already rolling off the tax, right? There's nothing that explains that by the time the new tax hits, the taxpayers will already have been finished paying for Park Campus. So that's just something we explain to people, but it's not there on the ballot. There's no way that it can be because it's not a part of the question because it's something that's automatically happening. And then I'll just end this part by reminding everyone of the voting dates. So vote by mail has already started, and it runs through March 14th. I believe ballots have to be postmarked by March 14th if they're going that way. And in-person voting begins on March 4th and ends on Election Day, which is March 19th. And that's it for the referendum update.
Thank you, Dr. Glickman. Okay, that moves us to our new business for this evening. These are just items that we are discussing this evening. No action will be taken tonight. The first one is a draft of the proposed 2024-2025 school calendar, which is the one that waives some legal holidays as required under Public Act 096-0640. Ms. Luck.
Share a little bit of a brief overview of that calendar. So the first day of school for staff would be August 19th, so we would have 2 institute days then, with the first day for students in grades 1 through 8 on August 21st. Kindergarten would then start August 22nd, and pre-K would start on August 26th. Last day of school would be June 3rd if no emergency days are used, and the last possible day would be June 10th. Conferences will be both the week of Thanksgiving, so Monday, Tuesday, November 25th and 26th, and then the Wednesday, Thursday, the week before spring break in March. And then winter break would be December 23rd to January 5th, with school resuming on January 6th. And spring break would be the week of March 24th. And both winter break and spring break align with District 127's calendar that's already approved. Any questions?
I was just curious if the professional development days, the late start Wednesdays, are still working out really well and the way you want them to.
I appreciate that question. I'd like to, I will just share that that is an ongoing conversation. It might be a conversation that in the future we want to continue to think about. This didn't feel like the time to consider changing the calendar and to delving into that very deeply. So we might be doing that in the next year or so, is just really looking at how we're using that time and other ways to provide professional development, other times of the day, that kind of thing. You want to add anything to that?
No. You did a good job explaining that.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our list is update on the asylum seekers.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about our newest students. So the presentation does focus on asylum seekers, but the idea is to start with terminology and kind of look at what's happening national, then Chicago, local, and here. So here we go. Our newest students and our support for our newest students really do encompass all three parts of this mission. We are empowering our learners, we're creating equity, and we're cultivating community inside our school and district, as well as our community, with the newcomer task force that I'll speak about in a little bit. Our agenda does include terminology, and then national asylum crisis, overview of Chicago, what's happening here, what's happening then in our classes now that we have students, and what does the newcomer task force, what is it doing for us in the county in Lake County? So here's a little graphic to explain all of our different terms. So newcomers is basically anyone who is new to the country for the first 3 years. So they don't have to qualify for multilingual services necessarily, because we have students who are coming from English-speaking countries. So Belize, England, Canada, South Africa. So they're not necessarily in our program, but they're new to the country, so they have a lot of different things to learn. Right? Then we have migrants, and we'll speak a lot about migrants as well today. So that is anyone who is really just trying to leave their country and come here for what would be like a better life, right? They're not under persecution, they're not running from something, they just want to leave their residence and come here. Okay? Next, we have refugees. Refugees are students or parents, people who are truly being persecuted. They are fleeing their country, they are in danger, they need to be safe. When we are speaking about this today for our point of reference, it's refugees and asylees in the United States. But obviously you could be a refugee, an asylee, and a migrant in a different country. Right? So one important distinction between a refugee and an asylee is where the papers are signed. So if I am a refugee, I have signed documentation to come to the United States in my home country, versus an asylee who fills out the same documentation after they have already come, in our case, to the United States. Good? All right, so they're all newcomers, and then that's just how we funnel through. Good? So the overview of the national asylum crisis sounds like, oh, it's kind of new, but really and truly it's not. It started August 31st of 2022, and it is where many students, families, kids, children from Venezuela and Guatemala predominantly, but others are listed as well, like Europe and Africa and Asia, have decided to come to Texas. They entered through Texas, and Texas said, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to need help from the rest of the nation, and we're going to start busing everyone to different places. And so we went to Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York. New York and D.C. have filled up very quickly just because of capacity of how many people already live there. And so now we are receiving everyone from Texas. Then they decide, okay, we're going to go to Texas, and then they're going to go to Los Angeles. So they're going between both of those. So in that case, we're getting a lot of families. And most asylum seekers, again, are from Venezuela now. That's what we're starting to see. However, there are many from Africa, Europe, and Middle East. And we'll talk about that as we move through a little bit. Chicago has always been, always since 1985, been a sanctuary city. And that is a place that just basically means you're really safe. I can come here, I'm an immigrant, I know I'll be safe in Chicago. I will be able to get food, shelter, medical care, education, anything that I need for me and my family, we're good here. Okay? Now you'll hear a term called welcoming city. It's exactly the same thing. So all the cities that were listed on that previous slide, they're all welcoming cities. When any family or person arrives, they're guaranteed shelter, food, medical care, and education. All right. This is a 1-minute clip about migrants getting to Chicago through busing. So they're on the bus. The bus drivers have just decided to drop off people wherever they felt like it and not really giving any instructions about where they were. And again, just 1 minute, and then I'll talk about how that makes sense for us in a second.
As city officials turn up the heat, enforcing new rules for migrant buses from the southern border, we've confirmed several reports of bus drivers bypassing the city and leaving migrants to fend for themselves in the suburbs.
Story doesn't end there. In two separate situations, new arrivals were found walking the highway. Our Casey Cronus live off the top tonight from the city's landing zone on the near west side with the latest. Casey.
Tia and Scott, this is where new arrivals should be dropped off. This landing zone is located at Des Plaines and Polk, and here they are registered with the city. Instead, some bus companies are trying to skirt the law. Just yesterday, migrants were left in Kankakee and told by their driver they were in Chicago.
The bus arrived at the truck stop at about 4:30 in the morning. One of the migrants asked us, asked one of our interpreters, where they were. They didn't know they were in Kankakee.
With no direction.
So this took place in December, and it sounds like, okay, it was December and it's Kankakee, that's really far away. Why, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Why did you do that? Because we are having students and buses being dropped off in Prairie Crossing, so it's very close to us. The Lake County Police has been present just to make sure everybody gets off the buses and onto the appropriate trains to get to Chicago for, lack of a better situation, processing. And so then they're able to figure out which papers they have, where they're going to go, which precinct they're going to be waiting in, and then placed into schools. So it's really not too far from home. Every Monday or Tuesday, the city of Chicago will post a dashboard of how many daily new arrivals, and it's a daily snapshot. This one is of February 13th. So if we just look at the top number, we have 35,513 individuals who have come through processing, and we have one person or one family who is waiting. This is today's data. So it was posted today at 11. We now have 35,821, and there are 17 people or families waiting at the police stations. So that was a week ago. And so we can just keep track of that if we would like to. Okay. So that's what's happening nationally, then Chicago. What's going on with us? As of today, because we had new students today, we have 42 asylees. 2 years ago, we didn't have any. So that's kind of cool. And we have 91 newcomers. The countries that are represented, they're not all. These are the highest incidents, right? So we have the highest amount of people coming from Nicaragua, then Venezuela, then Cambodia, Russia, and Ukraine. We have plenty of other countries, but those are the highest, just like with the highest incidence languages. Okay, so our newcomer trends, this is a little bit confusing because the math looks weird, right? Like, how come in 2013 do we have 45 students, and then in 2015 we have a change of -3, but you have 43? Obviously, that doesn't seem like correct math. It's not an error. It's the fact that you are a newcomer for 3 years. So we have had students who've kind of like rolled off the newcomer list, and other people who've either moved in or moved out. What I wanted to point out on this chart is that in 2013, 2014, we had 45 newcomers, 42 of them spoke Spanish. When we get down here to where we are right now with 91 newcomers, which is a change of 39 from last year, we have 43 languages in the district, and the majority of them do not actually speak Spanish. So it's very cool that we are changing our demographics. We have a lot of different students with different needs. And one thing that I've learned is that we have families who they only have an oral language, and it's called the Sentinelese language, and it's an island off of the Bay of Bengal. And so we are not only learning how to do school, but we're also learning how to recognize symbols for sounds for letters. And it's not all oral, but now we have to learn how to write and be in class. So there's a lot of really neat learning that I get to do with our teachers and our students, but they bring so many really cool experiences. Aside from that, this chart shows the highest incidence languages. Of course, English is the most prevalent spoken in our district, then by Spanish, all the way down to Tamil. And then there's 43. So if you're interested in the whole breakout for how many families and how many students speak whatever language, I can share it, but I didn't post it in. Okay, so now that we have students in our classes, how do we help them? What supports do we have? What are we doing? So the state put together some accommodations. We also have board policy and federal state legislation that says, okay, yes, your students are here. How are we helping? A lot of the state legislation does fall under McKinney-Vento, so homeless children. There are other Title III supports and grants and I think 2 slides, we can go through that. One slide. So basically, there are lots of grants and funds. However, the state and definitely ML department has noticed that it's kind of an unfunded mandate. We're getting more students with so many needs that we weren't budgeting for, we weren't expecting necessarily. How can we help? And so they're working on that. I did attend a webinar with ISB a few days ago. We're working on it. However, our local funding comes from McKinney-Vento. We also have Title III funding for LIEP. It's basically one of the grants that I manage that usually goes to students who are newer but not newcomers, and it's usually for summer school and BPAC, but we can also support parents and professional development through this one. Then we have the Immigrant Education Program, and we have to apply, and we received $3,000 more this year than last year, which is because of our numbers being increasing. I did apply for a grant for the foundation, and they awarded us $1,000 for our family, so thank you. And then we have local education-based funding. Okay. All right, so this is just a small kind of summary that newcomers, you're considered a newcomer for 3 years. We try to, under state code, so Article C14, we are supposed to provide as much native language instruction as possible, when possible. Clearly, not all students have an interpreter, but we do have some for those languages that you saw listed on the high incidence. We have interpreters for students who need it for 2 weeks at a time. And so if they're able, we talk to the teachers regularly and we renew for areas where we need the interpreter, maybe we don't need it as much, and we move through it that way. Students are able to receive a narrative report card. And then again, just that we have students who are newcomers who speak English. All right. The McKinney-Vento law allows us to provide breakfast and lunch for the students. Fees are waived, such as registration, et cetera. We provide transportation to school. We also want to make sure that we're teaching to the highest. You're in first grade, here's grade level expectations, but how do we get you there? What are all the scaffolds and supports? So interpreters, content, curriculum in your native language when possible, et cetera. We do not exclude due to immunizations. The students have 1 year to become compliant with state law. And they have the right to begin school right away. So if they register today, in theory, they could start school right away. Okay, so what is happening in the community? There's something pretty new, and it's called the Newcomer Task Force, and this is taking place in many of the counties that are receiving immigrants and a lot of migrants. So for example, McHenry, Lake, Cook, DuPage, they have a newcomer task force. I get to sit on that for both McHenry and also for here. And so what do we get to do? There's parent-teacher intake meetings, parent orientation, in and outside school experiences, homeschool liaison support, and parent resources. So to explain that just a little bit more, these are all the things that we've brought to District 46. So we have, most of the time, if it works out, we are able to get a sub or sub out internally, the ML teacher for a few hours, and the new family comes in, they take a tour, we do an intake, survey, we take an intake survey and figure out how can we help, where are you coming from, all the different things. We have multiple parent orientations, so they're before school, after school, they happen 3 times a year, and then we also have orientation folders, so when a new family arrives, they actually have a color-coded folder with some survival English, my child is attending today, this is the person who they should go talk to, a picture of the principal, a picture of the ML teacher, etc. We also have 2 homeschool liaisons, so they help with registration, shopping, doctor's appointments, all the things. And then we have a lot of parent resources, and here are some of them. So the next 2 slides are actually put together by Chicago Public School and their task force. And this is an enrollment hotline, so if you actually call this number, it will reroute you to the county that you might be registering, and you'll be able to get information about your very specific county and schools. And then these are just 2 very quick intake parent resource videos, but on the website, which is why there was the QR code at the beginning, they come in 10 different languages. And it's just, this is what school in the United States looks like. Okay. And then there's a refugee resettlement task force as well. Because when you come in as a refugee, you have very specific timelines and very specific requisites that you have to get done, and it's kind of a lot and confusing. And so they work with housing, how to obtain solid work, medical cards, enrollment in schools, just the system of working and being a child in the United States. Okay, so then, even more, down to us, what is happening in the class? So we are making sure our students are fed. We are making sure they have safe spaces. A lot of classes just really whole child. You need a minute, there is an area in the classroom that has cushions and books, and you just go take a moment whenever you need. There are class meetings that happen almost daily. How are you feeling? What is your zone of regulation? I was in one of those this morning with the 4th grade group. And then we're applying trauma-informed practices. Classroom support, students are learning how to do school. What does that mean? How do I get lunch? How do I navigate around? If there's a bell system, there's not a bell system, what classes am I taking? All those things. Materials in the native language to the extent possible. Careful consideration into themes and stories, and I've actually met with quite a few teachers, and we've looked at different, not novels, but like picture books that they were reading in class, and actually subbed them out for something else due to just the students who were in front of them. And then we have practice and preparation for drills and simulations, that is something that we learned the hard way that we need to take into consideration. Even just the school bell or, oh my goodness, the fire alarm went off as a drill, it's causing a lot of trauma for students because we have no idea what that could trigger. And we're just giving as much prep as possible. A lot of visuals, a lot of models and modifications in the curriculum when necessary, but still teaching the standard. Okay. And then when I talked about interpreters, this is who we have. So in Meadowview, we have 3 interpreters. We have Russian, Mongolian, and Spanish. I want to make it a whole new language. In Frederick, we have, and it's just written there, so Russian, Spanish for a newcomer, et cetera, Ukrainian, Gujarati, and then we have a Tamil. And then that's it. Do you have any questions for me?
All right, so thank you for taking us to school, Dr. Diaz. This was very informative. Thank you. I had 2 questions.
Yes.
The first one, when you were talking about welcoming cities, do you have to be designated as a welcoming city for Texas to send?
Yes.
Okay, because I
Yes.
was curious as to why only those 3 states. So it's by designation.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Who does that designation?
Government. No, it's
The city?
the city, the state, I think. Yes. Yep.
Okay. So in terms of like Prairie Crossing,
Yes.
right? They did or didn't raise their hand and say that we're a welcoming city?
To the best of my extent, and I do not want to misspeak, the bus decided that was a good place today to drive, not today, but to drive them out. But they knew with anticipation to have the Lake County Police presence be there for support.
Okay. Right. And then I know the board policies were referenced in there, and we recently had a policy meeting that I missed, so I apologize if this was already covered. But do we know if our board policies go far enough, given the evolving nature of this climate? And I guess that's probably more of a...
I'm going to try to answer that question. So I was thinking about how Dr. Diaz started the presentation and how you started just by talking about our newest students. So these are our newest students with all of the rights of every other one of our students. So all of our board policies are already covering them. And then Dr. Diaz talked about laws that we that also support our students, like the McKinney-Vento law, that supports homeless students or students who are unhoused. And so most of the students would fit under that law to some extent, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So at this moment, I can't think of any new policies that would need to be created, but I guess just we all stay tuned on that. Knowing that our situation here in Grays Lake is being mimicked and maybe expanded upon in many other areas of the state. So if there's a reason for policy to catch up with law and need, we should expect that we'll be getting that information down the pike.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is incredibly helpful, and even the terminology, so really, really appreciate it. And appreciate everything that you're doing as well. What can we do for you? Is there advocacy that we can do? I know that funding, continues to be an issue. And I know that's, Ed Red has talked a little bit about, moving something forward in the state assembly. Is there any other advocacy that we can do on behalf of the district to get our district and other districts in the state what they need to provide these services?
Not that I know of at the moment. I think Ed Red is a good avenue. I know SB is working very hard on that as well. So,
Great.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you. I have 2 questions. So if everyone, in the sound of your voice, could take 3 things away from the presentation, what do you want us to remember a year from now?
that this, even though it sounds like it's far away or that it's happening somewhere else, it's actually still happening very much here. And we have many migrants and students who need us, so that's good. The second would be that our policies and all the work on equity and inclusion really do set the groundwork for creating the community that we need. And that the students are coming with a lot of trauma and things that maybe we have never seen. And we're so lucky to have not seen that. And to sort of, yes, we need to treat everyone, you know, but they might need a little bit extra space, or just to know that their life is not the same.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sure.
And then the second question, if you were in our shoes, knowing all the things that we're trying to balance and all the priorities we're trying to meet, what should we pay attention to? What should we monitor over the next year to know whether our newest members are doing well and that they have well-being?
Yeah, and maybe two things. One is just to see retention, right? How long are our newest students staying? Are they being able to establish themselves and continue to be part of District 46 for their entire career? And the second one is basically everything that we do already. We monitor progress. We are using the same benchmarks. We have the same, so just to make sure they're growing the same way that all of our students are growing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I just jump in for a quick moment? I appreciated what you had to say, Dr. Diaz, about the trauma-informed practices, and I'm thinking about how that became an emphasis in our school district a couple of years ago, and it was before this new wave of new students started coming our way, and really before we knew that was going to happen. And I'm just so glad that we already started that training with our teachers about trauma-informed practices, because it's thinking that we're already doing. And when you pulled that slide up, that was, what are we doing in our classrooms? And you talked about calming corners, et cetera. Those are things that we have for all of our children. And yet now we have some newest students who specifically need those spaces and specifically need teachers who are thinking about what might have happened to a child prior to walking through the door.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz. I don't have any questions, but I just want to reaffirm our support as a board, so let us know how we can continue to support you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, the next item on the discussion list is a gun safety resolution update, and I'll hand that over to Mrs. Braden.
Thank you. So, this is the first night of discussion about this particular topic, and I have wanted to just kind of give you an update on my conversations to date, what I have learned in my conversations about other boards who have implemented a resolution, and then to point you to some resources for thinking about do we want to bring a resolution, and B, then if we do, what should that content be? What kind of a resolution would we be looking to adopt? So, as I mentioned at the last meeting, our local Moms Demand Action folks who are here with us tonight, and thank you for being here, met with Dr. Glickman and me about a number of things, but including the request that we consider a non-binding resolution talking about our stance around both gun violence prevention as well as gun safety. Since Highland Park specifically, I think we are no strangers to the fact that not only are actual incidents of gun violence all around us and prevalent in many, many communities, including ours, and that it's interesting that we're having this conversation about trauma, and I was actually, as I was thinking about what Dr. Diaz was sharing, I was thinking about newcomers coming and experiencing ALICE training and the trauma that can invoke in newcomers, not just a fire drill, but oh my goodness, and so I think it is an epidemic that I think Highland Park really brought awareness to within this community, but Moms Demand and other organizations have been sort of carrying this message to our communities for quite a few years, and so the timing is, the timing is still good, right? It's still happening. I talked to one of the board members from Warren Township High School about their process of coming to a resolution. And one of the questions I asked was, what were the main factors leading you to decide to create a resolution? Because it's not policy, right? It's a stance. It's just like our IASB resolutions. It's a statement of where we stand. And she talked mostly about the fact that it gives our superintendent a bit of a mandate to look at how to communicate about and bring into our schools opportunities to communicate and educate about gun violence prevention and gun safety. And then the other thing that I thought about was that it really is a way for us to sort of cement our advocacy. It is something that can be brought to the community. It is something that can be brought to our legislators, just like we bring those IASB resolutions to our legislators as well. So with that said, I personally think it is, sorry, just lost my computer screen here to speak. I think it is something that we should absolutely consider. Many districts in this area have passed such resolutions, and I've actually created and shared with you a shared drive that's got a bunch of examples from other districts, including Highland Park, including Deerfield, including Warren Township. And so what I wanted to do tonight was just talk through what that might look like and give you some food for thought and hear what your questions are. And if we can't answer them tonight, just kind of start that conversation so that we can come back in the future and continue the conversation. So the resolution general structure would be some, the whereases, which are the points that state the case for having such a resolution. So, we can include data such as how many mass shootings we've had in the United States, specifically school shootings. Also, we can sort of side with major medical organizations such as the AMA, which have advocated for gun violence to be called a public health crisis, and actually studied and looked at from that perspective, which right now it's not. And then we can also talk about the exposure to gun violence and what that does to our children. Case in point, as well as our teachers. The day-to-day experience of going to school and teaching in these environments, I did not have that experience when I was in the classroom, and I honestly can't imagine it. We did fire drills and tornado drills, and that was it. And going through ALICE training as a teacher, I can't imagine. And then the resolution is really sort of joining these other organizations to call on the state and the U.S. Congress for a number of items. And that would really be points of discussion for us as a board. We can call on, the ban, an assault weapon ban, or for the, we know that that's now the law in Illinois. We can sort of enjoin that if we wish. We can talk about legislation around universal background checks, safe storage of firearms, training as a condition for selling or possessing firearms, raising the age to 21, clear and present danger reporting data, so sort of red flag laws around FOID cards in Illinois, making sure that people with history of violence, and particularly domestic violence, do not have access to firearms. We have an opportunity to take a stand about arming teachers and staff in schools, which we have talked about before because it's been an IASB. We can also talk about calling on and funding for school threat assessment programs to better identify and support students who are at risk of violence. and just advocate for and support measures to stop gun violence and support safe gun storage as well, which is what we talked about earlier, what we have on our website, which is the opportunity to get a gun lock free from to safely store your firearms, and also support for having the conversation about guns, firearms in the home when your kids go for play dates, etc. So that is what I'm coming to you all with, and I know it's a broader conversation and there's lots of ideas to read, but I would love to hear just your initial thoughts and questions tonight, and then that will be helpful to me so we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, enthusiastically supportive of our district and our board putting out a resolution like this. I read through some of the examples you gave and would be happy with just about any of them that I saw, right? There's nothing in particular that I want to make sure is on there or make sure that's not on there. I think the broader the better as far as I'm concerned on this topic.
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions because we have been in this environment way too long in this country. And so our voice, continues to need to be raised. So I am in full support of it. And as a teacher myself, going through those trainings every year, it's different. And I would be fine with any resolution we bring forward.
Okay, great. Any other?
I am in agreement, and it's not just the threat of mass shootings, it's the possible preventions of suicides that concerns me too, and accidental homicides with,
You bring up such a great point. There are so many statistics, and if you go to Everytown USA, great site with so much good data. And what I like about that site is it makes recommendations about actions to take that are grounded in data and research, and suicide prevention and the easy access to firearms when you're a teenager who's going through the teenager stuff is a really, really dangerous combination. So thank you for bringing that up. So important.
I'm pinging a lot of ideas for starters. I totally support, with being support of the resolution. In terms of the advocacy piece, I'm thinking what does that look like? Is it potentially we would be in support with I don't know, maybe NAMI around mental health awareness in terms of suicide prevention or mental health crisis training, how do we fold that in to this to make sure that it's very intentional and actionable, I guess. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, and I know it come up in ISB proposals before, which was about gun stores opening within a certain proximity to, the samples you sent were great. If there's a way to cement our position on that as well, because I know that comes up at ISB. So
yeah, was that a couple years ago? It was last year.
But I feel like every other year it
Where
surfaces.
did that one land? Do you remember? Did it get brought up in the session?
But it didn't make it to the full discussion.
Okay. Okay. And I guess that's maybe another question, which is, do we want to bring, there have been, thank goodness, I think 2 years ago, finally, we had an IASB where we did not have a resolution for arming teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That failed 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
They finally took it off. I think it was at least twice it had to fail before they stopped bringing it. But I'm wondering, do we want to bring something? And I know we have our information here. We're talking about potentially bringing a resolution about the grants, right, for the property tax, the property tax grant. No, it's about the It's about that grant that we never get, that 127 always does, because it's kind of skewed towards
The
high
property
schools.
tax relief grant?
Yeah. So we've talked about bringing a resolution for that to IASB. Do we want to bring something around this? So maybe we can talk about that as well. Is there a piece of this, and maybe it is about, do we want to try to resurrect the one about, which one would be most impactful if we wanted to bring something to IASB? That could be a discussion as well. Because we'd have to hone in on, the resolution could be very broad, but we could hone in on one issue that we think, and maybe we could talk about it with people who know. Like, if we could bring one thing to the state level, what would it be? What would be most impactful? So,
I think that's what I would add, piggybacking, is I'm curious what the data says about what's effective. And also, how might we strategically triangulate, if you will, with other resolutions that might be coming up at the same time? I think the goal is not merely to remove the threat of gun violence. I think it's actually to make sure that peace is established. And so I'm wondering, is there some way we could work with other districts where a few resolutions would come in at the same time that would work toward that? Because establishing gun violence, while I absolutely want that, is too small. Like, really what we want is health and well-being for all of our students and staff. So I would love to see or think about how we could do that.
I can certainly talk to my contacts at other districts that I've had these conversations with, just about what else is out there, and see what else is on their mind, for sure. What was your first point, Christy? Because I was going to write it down, but I was listening really intently.
Like what's working? What's
that's
been
great.
effective?
Yeah.
And by the way, and to clarify, I don't mean it's too small as a criticism. I just mean maybe it's over time that we work on this.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, for sure. That definitely taken that way. I will say this: I have not looked at the Everytown data in a little while, but what stood out to me was safe storage. So, and what I really like about that is we don't have to agree on anything else about firearm ownership, but we can all agree on safe storage, hopefully. It's something that I think can get some pretty broad support for people who don't own firearms and people who do. And then enforcing some of the laws that we have in the state around safe storage, as well as red flag laws. If I remember correctly, and I'll go back and look, Illinois actually has some great legislation on the books. It's about how do we enforce it, and I think that is the key. But I'm happy to bring a little bit more data on that for our next conversation.
I wonder too if there's a community engagement piece to this in terms of what does our community, like what are the issues that our community can engage in. Perhaps, I'm just making this up, but everyone who owns a gun in Gray's Lake already has a gun lock. So I don't know if that's true or not, but perhaps there's an element of this that's our work.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's a community engagement.
I would love that, because I think the other thing that I think would be about how do we normalize having a conversation about firearms in each other's homes, so that it's not a weird thing when I'm sending my kid to his first play date with your kid to say, hey, tell me about your firearms, and vice versa. To me, that in and of itself, just normalizing that and making that a safe, something that we talk about, just like we talk about, do you have peanut allergies? I think would be really, might be something as well. So yeah, I love that idea. So, anything else? So next steps, I think what I'd like to do then is kind of put something together based on all the examples that we have. And then bring a little more information about mental health advocacy and some of the data to our next meeting. And then we can look at some specific language.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to contract renewal with GSF, nighttime custodial services for the 24-25 school year.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that. We are bringing a third amendment, which is the third year after we awarded a contract through an RFP process to GSF. So this is linked to CPI. which was part of the original specifications back in 2021-22. And the increase is 6.5%, and the renewal contract is just over $1 million. And we're pretty satisfied with what we get from GSF. They're doing a great job.
These renewals are annually for 1 year, is that right?
Yes.
And so the CPS or CPI is anomalously high because of the blip we had, and there's a chance that that increase amount will probably be less at this time next year.
Yeah, I'll go down to 3.4 the following year.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. And the last item on our new business section is the 24-25 contract renewal with Forward Edge for the managed cybersecurity services.
Yep, so this is a contract renewal for our cybersecurity with our managed service provider. You might notice this is a contract that we've had with them for several years, and there's a decrease, partially due to some of the work that we've done to make our network a little bit more secure. It includes things like 24/7 monitoring of our network and monitoring of endpoints, so teacher staff devices, to make sure there's no malware and things like that. It is an annual renewal, but this is recommending a 14-month renewal, so it'll coincide with our managed service contract in the future.
So I love the cost savings. Oftentimes we don't hear about decreases, so that's awesome. I'm curious in terms of just performance. Do we know how many threats have been mitigated as a result of the service?
I don't have that data at hand, but I can tell you that we are regularly notified of things like account information being found on the dark web, and then we work with teachers to make sure they change their password and do things like that. I don't have specific data though, but I could definitely come back if that's something you're interested in. So I have a question related to policy. So I'll just read the exact language so I don't mess it up. In terms of security procedures and practices, and this is the policy language, that protect covered information from unauthorized access, destruction, use, modification, or disclosure of covered information. In terms of that, does our district meet or does it exceed industry standards? I'm going to say we are meeting in that area, but we're definitely working towards meeting in other areas. It's kind of a moving target with cybersecurity. And so we are like making network improvements and doing other things to protect ourselves as best as we can. And so it's a moving target, and we're going to just keep working at it. It's never going to be like a check, we're done cybersecurity.
So I'll echo some of the questions we've had before. So if we were to support you, what would that look like in the coming year, given all of the priorities, again, that we're balancing?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question because we do have lots of priorities as a district. I think continuing to invest in our network infrastructure and invest in contracts like these to have the support that we need to continue to stay safe as we can stay. So.
Okay, thank you. Topics for future agenda items.
Well, we're going to be returning to, I believe, a few of the items from tonight. So we have contract renewals for GSF and Forward Edge, correct? We'll be bringing those back, yeah? Okay. Christy, are you wanting to return to gun safety at the next board meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll commit to getting a draft out so that it can be included in the packet.
Perfect. We'll do an approval for the 24-25 school calendar. We have the Woodview principal approval. We will be doing a sustainability update, which will include composting and other areas of sustainability for the district. And then, staying with that theme, there was a request a few weeks ago for discussion amongst the board members as to whether the board wants to have some type of a sustainability committee of community members, like an advisory group. And am I capturing that correctly, Christy? Because you're the person who brought that up, yeah? Yes. That's correct. So I've put that on for the next board meeting, yeah? Sound good? Okay. And then there's a couple of topics that aren't on the next board meeting that have been moved for March 20th, and I'm sure you'll understand why. So we were going to have the Way of the Panther group from GMS come on March 6th. Mr. Smith has asked for an extension, which I think, board, I'm sure you can understand that they just need a little more time as they've gotten their procedures in place over at GMS East. And I think that the students may be talking with you a bit about what they're actually doing at GMS East. So they're coming on March 20th, not on March 6th. So I've moved the that social media lawsuit discussion to March 20th because you liked the idea of doing that when there were some students present. We're also going to celebrate our wrestlers that night on March 20th because there have been some amazing wins for our wrestler athletes. Dr. Woke is going to do a presentation on staffing, correct, on March 20th. And also, I'm not positive about this date, but it's been a while, board, since we've talked about the student services review that we've done with DM Group. So remember, that's the work we've been doing this year, started last spring or last summer, I guess, and has been ongoing this year. We have a meeting with DM Group next week, and we'll be talking with them about when they're going to be presenting to the board. So I think it might be March 20th, but I'm not positive about that yet. So that's what we have for the next month.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Glickman. Do we have any additional public comments signed up for the evening? No. We do not have a closed session this evening, so I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.